The sea shimmered under the afternoon sun as luxury cars lined up outside the majestic Palais de Lumière, the crown jewel of the French Riviera. It was the wedding of the year, a spectacle where money spoke louder than vows and appearances. Meant everything. Everyone who mattered was there. Influencers with millions of followers, CEOs with net worths in the billions, European royals, and fashion icons flown in on private jets. And amidst them all, a woman walked in alone, unassuming, out of place, and completely invisible to those around her. Hannah Lee stepped onto the marble steps of the hotel, the wind catching her soft sage linen dress. It was simple. No embroidery, no label, no glitter. The square neckline fell modestly across her collarbones, and her flats, though worn, were clean and polished. Her chestnut hair was pulled into a low bun, held together by a wooden pin. In her arms, she cradled a small gift, wrapped in recycled brown paper and tied with a neat piece of twine. As she walked into the dazzling lobby, she paused, just for a moment, taking in the chandeliers that looked like they were made of stars, the champagne towers, the fashion, the money. She didn't belong here, not in the way others thought. And yet, she walked forward, her posture upright, her steps calm, with the kind of quiet strength that only comes from knowing who you are. At the check-in table stood a tall woman with a chiseled face and a headset snug against her sleek bun. Her name tag read Camille, and she held a clipboard like it was a sword. Camille's eyes flicked toward Hannah, instantly taking in the lack of designer accessories, the plainness of her dress, the absence of jewelry. Her smile tightened. "Service. Staff uses the side entrance," she said flatly, pointing toward a hallway marked personnel only. Hannah's voice remained gentle, but there was a calm firmness to it. "I'm not staff," she replied, holding out her cream-colored invitation card, its gold embossed lettering catching the light. "My name is Hannah Lee. I was invited." Camille took the card with suspicion, flipping it over twice like it might be forged. "One moment," she said, already muttering into her headset as she walked a few steps away. Hannah stood quietly, the gift held close to her chest. As more guests arrived in velvet, feathers, diamonds, and sequins, they began to notice her. The laughter came next, sharp, performative, dripping with judgment. A woman in a deep ruby red gown whispered to her friends, loud enough to be heard, "Who invited the maid?" That woman was Elise Morrow, a lifestyle influencer with a reputation for being both beautiful and brutal. Next to her, Sophia Reyes, owner of a luxury skincare line, pulled out her phone. "I swear I saw that dress on a Goodwill rack last week." She smirked, snapping a photo. "Oh my God," added Tara Clean, a reality TV star draped in ivory feathers. "Did she bring her gift from a farmer's market?" Hannah heard it all, but she didn't flinch. She met Elise's gaze directly, her eyes calm, hazel and warm, but steady like anchored stone. "It's a gift from the heart," she said. Soft, yet unshakable. Elise blinked, thrown off by the serenity. "This isn't a craft fair, sweetie?" she muttered with a sneer. More guests swept in, men in tuxedos with emerald cufflinks, women with necks wrapped in diamonds. Whispers grew louder. Eyes lingered longer. Phones were raised, ready to capture content, ready to laugh at the woman, who didn't belong. But Hannah stood there, unmoved, just a woman in a linen dress, holding a gift no one wanted, unaware that she was about to silence every voice in that ballroom and change everything. The scent of white orchids and expensive perfume hung thick in the air as more guests trickled into the grand lobby, their footsteps echoing off the marble. Floor like a chorus of judgment, Hannah remained where she stood, quiet and composed, while Camille, the concierge, whispered rapidly into her headset just a few feet away. Behind Hannah, a velvet rope fluttered slightly from the sea breeze sneaking through the glass doors. But the real storm was already gathering. A group of women in glittering gowns slowed their walk and encircled her like sharks scenting vulnerability. "Wait," Elise Morrow said, her ruby red gown rustling as she stepped closer. "Is that gift wrapped in newspaper?" Sophia Reyes let out a short, cruel laugh. "No, girl, that's recycled paper. She probably tied it with a shoelace." Tara Cleaning raised her phone, flipping it to video mode. "Okay, but seriously, this is content gold. Let's call this segment, Cousin from the Countryside Crashes Couture Wedding." Hannah didn't move. Her grip on the twine-wrapped gift stayed steady, her face calm, her silence louder than their giggles. A tech mogul in a velvet tuxedo, whispered to his wife. Who let the hippie in? She chuckled back, not bothering to hide her amusement. Probably here to sell handmade soaps. A younger guest, Jax, an NFT influencer with a diamond-studded Rolex, shouted, Yo, wrong event, Eco Queen! Coachella's that way! Laughter erupted around her, loud and rehearsed, as if mocking her was part of the evening program. Several. Phones flashed. Photos taken, videos recorded, captions already forming in their minds. Cringe guest. Mars Craft Fair crasher Camille returned with a wedding planner in tow, a woman with sharp cheekbones, a tighter bun than her smile, and a clipboard glowing like a weapon. Her name tag read Margot. Miss Lee, Margot said, eyeing Hannah's, dressed like it had personally offended her. Your invitation checks out, but this is a high society event. You don't appear prepared. Hannah met her gaze, unblinking. I was invited by name, she said gently. By Vivian. I came to wish her well. Margot's lips tightened. Yes, well, unfortunately, there is no place card for you. The seating chart is final, and there's no room for improvisation. She gave a brittle smile. Perhaps you're on the wrong floor. The staff meal is downstairs. Behind her, someone laughed loudly. Bet she thought this was a potluck. The circle around Hannah grew thicker now, luxury gowns brushing against her linen dress like silk trying to erase. Simplicity. Elise tilted her head mockingly. Hannah, darling, this wedding costs more than your entire lifestyle. Why would you show up like that? Honestly, it's embarrassing. Sophia's phone was still recording. Zoom in on those flats. I'm sorry, but did she walk here? Tara stepped forward, feathered skirt flaring as she dramatically examined the package in Hannah's hands. What's in there? Some essential oils and a handwritten card? She snorted. Or maybe a rock. Something grounding. Despite the barbed insults, Hannah stood firm, her spine unbending, her gaze unwavering. Her face didn't flicker. Not from the laughter, the comments, the cameras. She looked at Margot, then at Camille, and spoke. Calmly. I'm here to celebrate love. Not compete in a fashion show. The room fell briefly quiet, the silence tinged with confusion. Her voice wasn't shaken, her presence wasn't desperate. She wasn't backing down, but no one realized. Not Elise, not Sophia, not Tara, not even Margot, that they weren't mocking a poor woman. They were mocking a storm dressed as calm, and it hadn't even begun to rain. Gasps floated through the air like perfume when the bride finally appeared. Vivian LeBlanc descended into the lobby like royalty stepping onto her throne. Every step echoed with purpose, her mermaid-cut gown shimmering in silver light, hand-stitched with thousands of Swarovski crystals that caught the chandeliers like a galaxy orbiting her. Her blonde hair was woven into an intricate updo, crowned with a diamond tiara so bright it seemed to outshine the sunlit glass behind her. She didn't walk. She glided, her entourage trailing behind her in a synchronized flurry of silk and stilettos. And then she saw her. Her icy blue eyes landed on Hannah like a blade. The smile on Vivian's lips froze, then curled into something sharp, elegant and venomous all at once. Hannah, she said loudly, her voice cutting through, the chatter like a mic check. Oh my God, you actually came? The lobby turned toward the voice like a schoolyard waiting for a fight. Phones lifted again, fingers hovered over record buttons. The crowd held its collective breath. Vivian didn't stop. She turned toward Dao, her bridesmaids, Elise, Sophia, and Tara, and gestured grandly toward Hannah like a magician revealing a failed trick. Guys, this is Hannah Lee, she announced. My old friend from school. Still keeping it real, huh? That whole authentic life thing? The bridesmaids erupted in laughter like it was rehearsed. Tara snapped, that dress? Thrift store or DIY project? Sophia zoomed in with her phone. Oh, honey, no one does linen like regret. Elise stepped forward, lips ruby and curled. Hannah, babe, this is $1 million wedding. You showed up like you're on your way to buy herbal tea and attend a pottery class. The crowd chuckled, cruelly. Laughter echoed against marble and chandeliers. But Hannah still didn't break. She stepped forward slowly, gracefully, and extended the recycled paper package toward Vivian with both hands. The gift is for you and Lucas, she said softly, the twine bow still perfectly tied. Vivian didn't touch it. Instead, her eyes swept over the wrapping like it carried a disease. Newspaper wrapping, she said, her voice thick with mock pity. "What is this? A coupon book? Oh, Hannah, so quaint." The crowd burst out laughing, louder now. Someone from the back shouted, "Send her to the gift table. She can organize the trash." Margot, the planner, had heard enough. She stepped in, her patience drained. "That's enough," she said tersely to the group, before nodding to two hotel security guards waiting by the columns. "Escort her out, please. She's disrupting the event." The guards approached, tall, serious-faced. One of them, Paul, offered a stiff nod. "Ma'am, please come with us. We don't want to make a scene." A cruel irony, considering the scene already in progress. Hannah didn't argue. She gave Vivian one last look, a quiet, unreadable glance, then turned without a word and began walking with the guards, still holding the gift, still standing tall. Behind her, the glittering crowd parted, not with respect, but with mockery curling at the edges of their smiles. A few sipped champagne like it was theater. A few cheered. A few live-streamed it all. And above them all, Vivian stood radiant in her crown of crystals, smiling like she'd just won. But what none of them knew was she'd just declared war on the wrong woman. The marble beneath Hannah's feet gleamed, like ice as she walked beside the two security guards, her gift still tucked gently in her arms. Behind her, the laughter rose like a tide, taunting, giddy, ruthless. She didn't flinch. She didn't quicken her steps. She moved through the ballroom like someone who had been humiliated before and learned how to survive it. Guests turned. In their seats, their couture gowns rustling like silk leaves in a bitter wind, they whispered behind champagne flutes and stared over canapes, watching the woman in a plain linen dress and flats walk a path meant to shame her. "She's still holding that sad little gift?" Sophia snorted from a nearby table, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Is she serious?" Phones recorded. Live streams pinged with new viewers. Emojis and flames and clown faces flooded the screen. "This is iconic," Elise grinned as she followed close behind, heels clicking like daggers. The nerve of her, coming in like she mattered. They weren't done. As Hannah neared a floral arch bursting with orchids, the three bridesmaids closed in like a pack of predators in glittering gowns. Elise leaned in close, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You're a walking embarrassment? Hannah, did you think we wouldn't recognize that thrift store energy?" Sophia flicked her manicured nail against the recycled paper package, the twine jostling slightly. "What's in here? A tea bag and a dream." Tara didn't wait. She grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray and, without hesitation, accidentally spilled it across Hannah's dress. The pale sage fabric darkened instantly, the scent of citrus and wine soaking in. "Oh no," Tara said with a smirk. "Oops." The crowd roared with cruel delight. Hannah paused. Her knuckles whitened ever so slightly around the package, but her expression didn't crack. Not a tear, not a word, not a single plea. Livestream comments exploded. "Kick her harder." That's what she gets. Total loser vibes. Why is she not crying yet? Above it all, Vivian stood with her phone raised, broadcasting the moment to her followers with perfect lighting and a rehearsed smile. "Told you not to invite her? Margot," she said with a cruel purr. "She's ruining the vibe." And then Vivian moved. She stepped onto the stage, her tiara gleaming under the chandeliers, and snatched the microphone from the MC. Her voice echoed through the ballroom like a bitter joke. "Everyone," she said sweetly, waving toward Hannah's retreating figure. "Can we talk about this?" All heads turned. "She's my old schoolmate," Vivian announced, fake sympathy dripping from every word. "Back then she was sweet, quiet, the nice girl, but I guess she mistook my kindness for an open invitation to crash my wedding." Gasps, mixed with laughter. "She brought a blanket, wrapped in trash," Vivian continued, raising her champagne glass. "To charity cases, I say. Cheers." Someone from the crowd threw an olive. It bounced off Hannah's shoulder. More laughter. "Snack. For the road," another voice jeered. Still, Hannah walked on, soaked, humiliated, but untouched in spirit. Her shoulders remained straight, her steps graceful, the ballroom blurred with cruelty. She was nearly at the doors now, the towering glass exit glowing, with sunlight offering her escape or exile. Phones zoomed in on her every step. Elise's live stream hit 10,000 viewers. Her voice cackled in the background. "This is Hannah. Nobody thinking she could blend in with everybody. Another comment flashed across the screen. Bet she's sleeping in her car tonight. The insults didn't break her, but what came next would cut deeper than words. Because Vivian wasn't finished. The glass doors loomed ahead, sunlight spilling, through like salvation. Just a few more steps and Hannah would be free from the circus of cruelty she had quietly endured. Her dress clung damp to her body from the champagne, her fingers still gently wrapped around the soaked, twine-tied package. But Vivian wasn't ready to let her go. No, humiliation wasn't enough. She wanted destruction. Wait. Vivian's voice rang out like a gunshot across the ballroom. Officers, stop her! The guards paused mid-step. The crowd froze, breath-catching, heads whipping around. Vivian descended the stage with theatrical panic in her eyes. Her diamond. Tiara catching the light as she pointed at the modest gift in Hannah's arms. "Check the package," she cried, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. I think something's wrong. She's been unstable since school. What if it's dangerous? The accusation sliced through the air like a knife. Hannah turned, stunned, but still silent. Her brows drew ever so slightly in confusion, not fear. What if she brought something? To ruin this day? Vivian pressed on, now shaking for effect. I invited her out of pity, and now this? Gasps swept across the room. Phones were raised again. Search her! Open it now! She's a threat! The crowd morphed from laughing spectators into an angry mob in pearls and tuxedos. Panic shimmered just beneath the surface of their glee. Paul the guard hesitated. His jaw clenched, but his partner didn't. Without asking permission, the second guard yanked the gift from Hannah's arms. The wet paper tore beneath his fingers. Twine unraveled. Brown packaging fell away. And there it was. A quilt. Hand-stitched. Delicate. Beautiful. A patchwork of warm colors, fine embroidery, and old memories. The room stared. Then Vivian laughed. Loud. Triumphant. Cruel. A blanket, she shrieked. That's what you brought to $1 million wedding? What is this? Your life savings sewn into fabric? The room erupted again, but this time it wasn't laughter. It was ridicule-laced. With disgust, she's insane. Lock her up. This woman's a danger to luxury events everywhere. Live streams surged past 20,000 viewers. Vivian's face beamed through every screen like a queen who had slain a peasant. Hannah stood frozen, not because of the words, not because of the mocking, but because the one gift she had poured love into, the one thing that carried meaning, had been torn apart like garbage in front of strangers. She blinked slowly. Not a tear fell, but something colder settled behind her eyes. The ballroom grew louder. A cocktail shrimp flew through the air and landed near her feet. Someone whistled. Someone else shouted, "Call security again, this time for the blanket!" She's ruining the vibe. Another guest hissed, sipping wine and watching like it was all a scene from a film. Jax grinned into his camera. Bet she sleeps in the back of a van with that thing. Should have stitched herself a personality. And through it all, Hannah stood, alone, ruined in their eyes. But soon, every single person in that room would wish they'd never spoken her name, because outside those doors, the engines of justice were already purring, and vengeance, elegant, quiet, unstoppable, was about to arrive in a tailored navy suit. This torn quilt hung limply in the guard's hands, its delicate threads unraveling under the weight of mockery. Hannah didn't reach for it. She simply looked at it for a moment. This labor of love, stitched in quiet nights, meant to carry warmth into a cold room, and watched it dangle like a flag of shame. Vivian's laugh pierced the air again, high, gleeful, dangerous. Who brings a blanket to a wedding? She shouted, holding her champagne aloft like it was a mic drop. Honestly, who raised you? The crowd was fully hers now. An audience with no conscience. Phones hovered in the air like judgmental drones. Flashes popped like paparazzi on the hunt. Elise's live stream surged past 25,000 viewers. Comments exploded. She's a whole meme. Someone check her for emotional damage. Oh wait, too late. Who even is this nobody? Tara twirled her feathered skirt dramatically and yelled, "Maybe she thought this was a sleepover." Laughter erupted, raw, unfiltered, loud, the kind that echoes in nightmares. Then someone tossed a canapé. It hit Hannah's shoe and fell beside the corner of the soaked quilt. "Snack for the poor girl," a voice called. A burst of claps and cruel cheers followed. Margot, the wedding planner, stood off to the side, trying to stay invisible now that things were spiraling out of control. Even Camille, the concierge who'd started this entire spiral of judgment, stared at the floor, face pale. The cruelty had morphed into chaos. Vivian climbed back on stage, her designer heels tapping against marble as she seized the mic again. Hungry for more. "Everyone, I just want to take a moment," she said, a mocking smile on her lips as she gestured grandly toward Hannah. "Let's give her a round of applause for showing us what delusion looks like." The crowd obeyed. They clapped, they whistled, they laughed, and as Hannah stood there dripping in champagne, her handmade quilt ruined, her heart torn open for all to see, Vivian delivered the final blow. "I told Margot not to invite her," she said, fake sadness in her tone, "but I guess charity cases just sneak in through the cracks." A hush fell, not because of guilt, but because they were hungry for the next insult. Vivian raised her flute to high standards, and keeping them that way. The room applauded again, loud, empty, heartless. And then, just as the guards placed their hands gently on Hannah's arms to guide her out through the glass doors, Vivian's voice sliced through the air one last time. "Wait! Stop her! Again!" Everyone turned. Hannah paused mid-step. Vivian walked forward slowly, a performance in motion. Her tone changed, dripping with faux concern. "Security," she said softly. I heard she's been a little unstable since school. Can someone please check her bag? What if there's something dangerous in there?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. "She's always been jealous of me," Vivian said, trembling her lower lip for added drama. "She could have brought anything. Out of spite, out of obsession. I'm just trying to protect everyone." More whispers followed. "She's crazy? She brought a bomb? Is this like a protest thing?" The guards looked unsure now. Paul's eyes flicked to Hannah's face, still calm, still unreadable, and then to the ruined quilt in his partner's hand. But orders were orders. His partner began unwrapping it further, tearing the rest of the soaked paper like it was evidence in a crime scene. And there it was, now fully visible. A quilt. Beautiful, painstakingly made, covered in embroidered patterns and stitched initials. A handmade legacy. Vivian let out a loud, triumphant laugh. "Oh my God," she sneered. "It was just a blanket? That's even more pathetic." The room let loose another wave of laughter. One guest shouted, "Lock her up!" for being emotionally dangerous. Someone tossed another olive. It hit the marble and rolled away. Jax panned his camera across Hannah again. "Yo, this is the best content I've ever recorded. She's literally the saddest person I've ever seen." The mob had gone from mockery to complete character assassination. And Hannah stood tall, silent, still, as if she knew something none of them did. Because
Isn't Lassen adesso la TV lega bandiana narada and what photo and
engines purred like waiting lions, and someone stepped into the light. The tone of the room shifted. Phones lowered. Laughter faded. Even Vivian's face began to pale, because the man who had just arrived was not part of their world. He owned it. The laughter was still echoing when the grand glass doors burst open. A sudden gust of coastal air swept into the ballroom, carrying with it a hush so complete it seemed to mute the chandeliers themselves. Outside, a fleet of Rolls-Royces pulled to a stop, their black and silver bodies gleaming under the Riviera sun like panthers wrapped in chrome. Drivers in white gloves opened doors in unison, and from the lead car, he stepped out. Julian Voss. The crowd went completely still, phones lowered, mouths parted, expressions shifting from glee to disbelief. At 42, he was more myth than man. The elusive billionaire behind Voss Enterprises, owner of global hotel chains, fashion houses, and luxury brands. He was rarely seen in public, never appeared at social events. Paparazzi hadn't caught a clear photo of him in years. He was the kind of man who made boardrooms tremble with a look. And now, he was here. He walked forward slowly, like the room belonged to him because it did. Tailored in a midnight navy suit so sharp it could cut glass, his silver cufflinks shimmered with understated power. Dark hair swept back, gray eyes cool and focused, his every step silenced whispers before they could take form. The MC stammered into the microphone, voice cracking. Is that Julian Voss? Gasps rippled across the ballroom like aftershocks. No way, someone whispered. The Julian Voss? He doesn't even attend his own product launches. But Julian wasn't looking at the crowd. His gaze cut through the glittering chaos, through the diamonds and gossip and ruined dignity, until it landed on one person. Hannah. Still. Standing at the edge of the ballroom, still holding nothing but her composure, her champagne-stained dress clung to her like memory. Her soaked flats left faint marks on the marble, her hazel eyes lifted slowly, meeting his, and then she smiled. A small, private smile, like the first sun after a storm. Julian's entire face changed. The cool, calculated expression softened. Ever. So slightly, and his pace quickened. He reached her without a word, closing the space between them as if he'd been searching for her all night. His hand reached for hers. His thumb brushed the side of her knuckles. You okay? He asked softly. His voice meant only for her. She nodded. Always, she whispered. That was all he needed. Julian turned, his back now to the woman he cherished, and faced the crowd with a presence that swallowed the room whole. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, measured, unshakable. Apologies for the interruption, he said, loud enough to echo. I just wanted to introduce the most important woman in my life. The crowd held its breath. This is my wife, Hannah Voss. Silence. Then, shock exploded like shattered glass. Vivian's tiara slipped. Elise's phone dropped. Sophia gasped so hard her sequins seemed to dim. Tara went pale. Live comments surged. What? She's his wife? No way that's Hannah Voss. This is insane. But Julian wasn't done. His voice cut clean through the stunned ballroom. Now, who ordered my wife to be escorted out? The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was terrifying. The guards froze. Margot's tablet trembled in her hands. Camille, the concierge, stared at the floor as if it might open and swallow her. The laughter had stopped. The smirks vanished. Because the man in front of them didn't just have power, he had the receipts. The air in the ballroom felt thick, like it had turned to glass, and everyone was afraid to breathe too loud, lest it shatter. Julian stood tall, one hand still holding Hannah's, the other resting calmly at his side. His presence alone was enough to make grown CEOs sink into their chairs and influencers fumble their phones. But it was the weight behind his words that made the silence feel like a scream. I'll ask again, he said, his voice low but slicing. Who ordered my wife to be escorted out? And for what reason? Still, no one spoke. Not Margot, who gripped her tablet like a shield. Not Camille, whose headset buzzed uselessly against her cheek. Not the bridesmaids, who had transformed from divas to statues. Julian's eyes swept over the crowd, controlled, calculating, lethal in their calm. Then, a flicker of movement near the altar. The groom, Lucas Beaumont. He stepped forward, tuxedo crisp, hair tousled, confusion and realization warring on his face. He wasn't looking at Vivian. He was looking at Hannah. And then, his voice broke through the silence. Hannah? He breathed, almost to himself. It's really you. The ballroom stirred. Julian turned to face him, brows slightly raised. Lucas ignored it. He walked toward Hannah, all blooming in every step. You helped me. You and Julian gave me my first loan, remember? When no one else believed in my startup. You stayed up late helping me tweak my pitch deck. You didn't just support me. You built me. His voice trembled, raw with emotion. I've been looking for you for years. But you disappeared. Vivian, still standing near the stage, paled beneath her perfect makeup. Lucas's voice sharpened. You changed my life. He turned slowly to face the crowd, his eyes no longer soft, I can't marry someone who humiliated the woman who made me who I am, he said, his tone steady, laced with betrayal. Vivian, what you did to her, it's not just cruel. It's disgusting, gasps rippled again. But this time it wasn't at Hannah, it was at Vivian. Lucas's jaw clenched as he stepped up on the stage beside her. You planned this, didn't you? You invited Hannah just to mock her, just to make yourself look bigger. Vivian's lips parted, but no words came. Her tiara had shifted, no longer a crown, now just a tilted accessory clinging to a lie. Saw your messages, Lucas said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Laughing with Elise about putting her in her place. You didn't want to celebrate love. You wanted a stage to humiliate someone better than all of us. Vivian froze. Phones. We're already up again. The crowd was no longer on her side. You're not the woman I thought I loved, Lucas said quietly. This isn't a wedding. It's a performance, and I'm done playing the part. He pulled the wedding band from his pocket and dropped it at her feet. The sound was deafening. The crowd erupted, not with cruelty this time, but with applause. Gasps and the sound of truth landing hard. Vivian stepped back, mouth open, mascara threatening to betray her pride. Julian stood at the center of it all, still holding Hannah's hand, his expression unreadable. And Hannah, she hadn't spoken a word. She didn't need to, because in a ballroom that had mocked her, dragged her, tried to shame her, she had just become the center of gravity. Vivian stood frozen, her tiara askew, her breath shallow, as the silence turned inward on her. The ring Lucas had dropped at her feet glinted like a verdict. No, she whispered, barely audible. Then, louder as panic started to rise. No, Lucas, please. This is our wedding. You can't throw it away because of her. She pointed at Hannah, voice cracking. She's nothing. She tricked you. She made you pity her. But Lucas stepped back, his eyes steely. No, Vivian, you tricked me. You built this whole wedding around vanity and cruelty, and I was too blind to see it. Vivian reached out, her crystal-studded gown rustling, as she tried to hold on to his arm. Lucas, don't do this. Don't do this to me. I'm not doing anything, he said, his voice resolute. You did this. To Hannah. To yourself. He turned away, leaving her trembling alone under the glare of chandeliers she no longer owned. Julian stepped forward now, commanding attention, without lifting his voice. Hannah, he said, his gaze never leaving hers, chose to live simply, not because she had to, but because she values what matters. He turned to the room, letting his voice rise just enough to be heard at the furthest edge of the ballroom. She's my partner, my equal, and the reason behind half of what I've built. Gasps rang out like gunshots. Julian nodded to a woman in a sleek black suit, his chief of staff. Clara. She was already walking forward, tablet in hand, calm as a scalpel. Clara, Julian said without turning, cross-check the guest list with security footage and social media. Anyone who insulted Hannah, anyone who mocked her, remove them. Effective immediately. Clara didn't blink. Already compiling names, sir. The room fell into a new kind of silence. Panic. Guests glanced around nervously. Phones slipped quietly into clutches. Jewelry suddenly felt too loud, and then Clara began calling names. Elise Morrow, she said, scrolling her tablet. Live-streamed verbal harassment, public defamation, escort her out. Paul, the guard, was already moving. Elise gasped, trying to laugh it off. This is a misunderstanding. Wait, no. I didn't mean it. I was just... But no one listened. She was escorted out, her ruby gown trailing behind her like a ripped curtain. Sophia Reyes, Clara said next. Video evidence, mockery, brand association revoked. Sophia's jaw dropped. My brand? But security was already there. Tara Clean, assault. Recorded, permanent blacklist. Tara tried to step behind a floral pillar, but the guards were faster. Vivian watched in horror as her inner circle, her glittering empire of mean girls, was dismantled in real time, and then Clara turned one last page. Vivian LeBlanc. The name echoed like thunder. Vivian's mouth moved, but no sound came. For defaming Hannah Voss, orchestrating a public humiliation campaign, and attempting to weaponize mental health accusations, Clara continued smoothly, you are removed. From this property and all future Voss-affiliated events, No, no, you can't. I'm the bride, Vivian shrieked. But no one came to her defense. Even the photographers stopped clicking. Two guards stepped forward. She tried to pull away, but her gown snagged on a chair leg, tearing the hem as she stumbled. The crowd parted. Her exit wasn't graceful. It was justice. And outside, the paparazzi waited like wolves. Behind her, whispers bloomed like wildfire. She planned all this. She mocked Hannah for nothing. She really tried to destroy someone better than all of us. Vivian's tiara finally slipped from her head, clattering onto the marble with a hollow, ringing sound. No one picked it up, and inside the ballroom, silence reigned, until all eyes had turned back to the woman who had said nothing, and yet won everything, Hannah Voss. As Vivian was dragged out, her gown torn, her cries ignored, her tiara abandoned on the floor, the ballroom slowly settled into a hush that felt sacred. The storm had passed, and in the center of it all stood Hannah Voss, the woman they had mocked, insulted, and underestimated. She hadn't raised her voice, once. She hadn't defended herself. She didn't need to, because now the truth stood taller than any accusation. And then, through the crowd, Lucas stepped forward again. This time, slower, softer. There was no pride in his posture now, only remorse. He reached her like a man carrying the weight of years in his chest. "Hannah," he said quietly, his voice strained. "I'm so sorry." She looked up at him, her expression open, gentle, but unreadable. "I didn't know you were here," he continued, his voice low but echoing in the quiet room. "I didn't know what Vivian had planned. If I'd known what she was going to do to you, I would have stopped everything before it started." She didn't interrupt. She let him speak. "You and Julian, years ago, when I had nothing, you didn't just believe in my company. You believed in me. You gave me the chance that built my life, my success. You never asked for credit. You never posted about it. You just helped and disappeared." His throat tightened. Eyes glistened. "I owe you everything. And today I stood there while they tried to humiliate you. I stood with them instead of standing with you." He paused. Then, in front of everyone, in front of the guests, the cameras, the live stream still running, he lowered himself to one knee. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't dramatic. It was sincere. "I can never repay you," Lucas said softly. "But I can start by saying thank you. And I'm sorry. Truly." The room didn't move. Not a single phone shook. Not a voice whispered, just the stillness of something real. Then, Hannah smiled. It wasn't smug. It wasn't victorious. It was warm, deep, forgiving. She reached out and gently placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Rise, Lucas," she said softly. "You've already made the right choice." He stood slowly, blinking back the guilt in his eyes. And as he stepped aside, the guests, once complicit in cruelty, applauded. Not out of obligation, but out of respect. Livestream comments exploded once again, but this time they carried reverence. Hannah is grace. What a woman! That's real power. Calm, quiet, and unstoppable. Some guests dabbed their eyes. Others looked down, ashamed. Because in a room full of luxury, diamonds, and pride, the woman in a linen dress had become the most powerful person in the building. As the final echoes of applause faded and Lucas stepped back into the crowd, Hannah stood alone for a moment beneath the chandelier's glow. She had walked into this ballroom drenched in ridicule. She now stood as its center of gravity. Julian moved to her side again, his expression gentler now, his sharp edges softening only for her. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly, his voice for her alone. "I wanted to," she replied, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "For us." She turned and disappeared through a quiet side door, leaving behind silence and expectation. The ballroom held its breath. And then she returned. The guests gasped. Even the chandeliers seemed to catch her differently. Hannah Voss, no longer in. Her champagne-soaked linen dress now glided into the room in a gown of ivory silk. It clung softly to her figure, the fabric flowing like liquid moonlight. The bodice was embroidered with golden thread and delicate patterns, tasteful, timeless, unmistakably regal. Her hair had been let down, cascading in chestnut waves over her shoulders. A single pearl clip caught the light, simple but commanding. She wore no diamonds, no crown, no designer label shouting for attention, and yet no one had ever looked more like she belonged. She didn't walk. She owned her steps. The room fell completely silent, not out of intimidation, but reverence. She wasn't just beautiful. She was undeniable. Julian's eyes never left her. He stepped forward, reaching out, not to lead her, but to meet her, their fingers linked, and that was all they needed. No announcement, no introduction, just presence. Then, from the far end of the room, a silver-haired man in ceremonial robes stepped forward. Father Emile, the same priest who had quietly wed Julian and Hannah years ago, beneath the stars in a monastery far from wealth, far from cameras, far from this chaos. He looked at them both with fondness and peace. He raised his hands. No one spoke. No one moved, because this wasn't just about vows. It was about witnessing truth. Though they were already married, what unfolded next wasn't a ceremony. It was a reminder of who they were, of what love, loyalty, and quiet power looked like. Guests, once cruel, stood in silence. A few dabbed at their eyes. Victor Chen's emerald cufflinks didn't shine as brightly anymore. Leia's sapphire gown no longer felt bold, but loud. Jax didn't dare raise his phone, because this was a moment no device could capture. This was a woman, once mocked, now worshipped, not for vengeance, but for grace. The ballroom slowly exhaled, as if releasing a breath it had been holding for hours. Outside, the French Riviera glowed in the twilight, and the cliffs surrounding the Palais de Lumière were lit with soft lanterns that danced like stars on earth. The reception had moved beneath the open sky, where moonlight spilled over velvet tablecloths and a quartet played beneath a canopy of hanging lights. Hannah and Julian danced slowly at the center of it all. No fanfare, no choreographed spectacle. Just hands intertwined, hearts steady, and a silence between them filled with everything they didn't need to say. Her ivory silk gown shimmered under the lanterns. His hand rested gently at her back, and the world watched, because by now, the world was watching. Near the edge of the reception, Clara approached, her tablet now dark, the storm managed, the damage handled. "It's done," she said softly to Julian and Hannah, not interrupting, only informing. "You're trending." Across every platform. 20 million views. Hashtag like the billionaire's heart. Julian chuckled, the sound low and warm as he pulled Hannah closer. "She is," he said. "She always was." Hannah smiled, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. Not for the cameras, not for the guests, just for them, just for peace. Guests who had earlier mocked her now watched with quiet awe. Some approached with apologies they didn't yet know how to say. Others simply sat, stunned, unsure how to digest the shame they'd helped create. Even Victor Chen, the tech mogul who once muttered about farmers' markets, said nothing now. His wife Leia had lowered her fan, her sapphire dress suddenly feeling theatrical beside Hannah's serene glow. Jax didn't live post anymore. His phone sat untouched on the table, the screen dark. Like his relevance. They had all come for spectacle, and they got something else entirely. A lesson. One not shouted from stages or preached in captions. A lesson in worth. Not the kind born in wealth or followers or trending hashtags, but the kind stitched into handmade quilts. The kind that walked quietly into a room and dismantled everything fake with a single look. Later that night, beneath the stars and the soft thrum of instrumental music, Hannah stood beside Julian on the balcony overlooking the sea. She wasn't thinking of revenge. She wasn't thinking of the mockery. She was simply breathing, unbothered, unshaken, whole. And the internet, which had moments earlier tried to tear her apart, now couldn't stop celebrating her. She didn't yell. She didn't clap back. She just stood there and let the truth speak for her. New definition of elegance. Hannah Voss. She's the storm that stayed calm. The world would remember the night Vivian LeBlanc fell, but they would never forget the woman she tried to destroy, and couldn't, because Hannah Voss didn't need to fight to win. She just needed to be. Back inside the Palais de Lumière, the champagne still flowed, but it no longer tasted like celebration. The music continued, soft and refined, but the atmosphere had shifted completely. Guests no longer bragged, posed, or preened. They sat quietly at their tables, sipping and reflecting, unsure how to move on from what they had witnessed. And then the world turned on Vivienne LeBlanc. It began within the hour. Outside, the paparazzi who once begged for her attention now shoved flashbulbs in her face like torches. They captured everything. The torn hem of her dress, the mascara streaked across her cheeks, the hollow look in her eyes as she was ushered into a waiting car. No longer glowing, but gutted. Online, it was worse. Her name trended globally. Not as a fashion icon, but as a cautionary tale. Vivienne cancelled. Mind your mean girl bride. Check. Mocked. The wrong woman. Old tweets resurfaced. Elitist captions. Subtle digs at the poor. Mama condescending comments she'd once thought were witty. Her brand sponsors panicked. Luxury labels pulled out. Partnerships vanished. Her influencer empire, once built on exclusivity, perfection, and social domination, collapsed in real time. The woman who had laughed the loudest just hours ago was now the internet's most hated villain. And all the while, Hannah said nothing. She didn't gloat. She didn't post. She didn't need to. Because now, it was time for the truth to speak. As the guests gathered again inside the ballroom for the final toast, Julian stepped onto the stage, holding a glass in one hand, and Hannah's hand in the other. "I think," he said, his voice calm and clear, "it's time we correct a few assumptions." He turned slightly, nodding to Clara, who stood at the back of the room. With a tap on her tablet, the projector flared to life, illuminating the ballroom with a series of slides. Screens appeared around the room, each one revealing the truth they'd all ignored. Hannah's name, on contracts, on boards, on ownership deeds, on financial statements. "Voss Enterprises," Julian said, "has never been just mine. From the beginning, every hotel, every fashion house, every luxury brand we've built has been co-owned, co-managed, and co-shaped by my wife, Hannah Voss." Gasps. Audible. "She's approved the designs you wear, funded the startups you envy, rebuilt schools in cities you've never visited, and lifted thousands without ever once needing the spotlight." The room was frozen. The screens now glowed. With a portfolio of Hannah's impact, billions in assets, charities founded, brands built, and people empowered. "I may be the name you know," Julian continued, "but she is the reason you respect it." The weight of his words settled over the crowd like fog, thick, undeniable, and humbling. Guests looked around in awe. Those who had laughed now whispered apologies they couldn't say aloud. She wasn't the poorest person in the room. Julian said finally, raising his glass. She was always the richest. In grace, in power, in purpose. He turned to Hannah. "I'm just lucky enough," he added with a faint smile, "to stand beside her." The room erupted in applause. Not polite, not performative, but real, pure, earned. Not for Julian, not for wealth, but for the woman who had walked into a battlefield dressed in simplicity. And emerged the quiet queen of it all. The final round of applause still echoed faintly in the ballroom when Lucas Beaumont stepped forward again. But this time, he didn't come as the groom of a canceled wedding. He came as a man humbled, completely. He crossed the floor slowly, his tuxedo still. Crisp, but the pride he once wore like armor had melted away. Every step he took felt deliberate, like walking toward truth with nothing to hide behind. He stopped just in front of Hannah, eyes glassy, voice soft. "Hannah," he said, "I don't know how to explain what I feel, but I need you to hear this." She turned to him gently, her expression calm, inviting, but not indulgent. "I had no idea Vivienne invited you just to hurt you. I had no idea what she was planning. But when I saw you walk through those doors, alone, carrying that gift, I remembered everything." He swallowed hard, emotion threatening his words. "You were always kind, always thoughtful. You never asked for attention, never needed it. And yet, you were the reason I ever made it. You and Julian. You believed in me when no one else did." He paused, searching her eyes. The crowd stood still, listening, not out of curiosity, but reverence. "You didn't deserve any of this," he said. "And I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. I'm sorry I let them treat you like that. I'm sorry I forgot who you were." Then, slowly, deliberately. Lucas lowered himself onto one knee. Not to propose, but to honor, to apologize, to acknowledge her worth in front of the same crowd that had once laughed at her. "I owe you everything," he said quietly, voice thick. "And I'll never forget that again." There was no sound, but the hush of grace filling the room. And then Hannah, moved not by the moment's spectacle, but by its sincerity, reached forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was light. "Forgiving, final. Rise, Lucas," she said gently. "You've already made it right." Lucas stood slowly, nodding, unable to speak. The crowd, those same guests who had once whispered about her flats and her dress, applauded again. Not because they were told to, but because they understood now. That real class wasn't in couture. T wasn't in wealth or nameplates. It was in how a woman could be crushed, dismissed, and dragged, and still rise, not to punish, but to forgive. And in that moment, Hannah Voss didn't just reclaim her dignity, she became the standard for everyone else's. The night had deepened, and so had the silence. Not the awkward kind, the sacred kind. The kind that follows truth after it's finally been spoken. The kind that lets love take its full shape. Guests lingered under the stars now, scattered across candlelit tables and marble. Balconies, their voices hushed in awe. Gone were the whispers of gossip. Gone were the petty eyes. All that remained was reverence. But Hannah and Julian were nowhere to be seen. They had quietly slipped away. No spotlight, no attention, just each other. On a private balcony overlooking the cliffs and the sea, Hannah stood with her back to the wind. The moonlight danced across her ivory gown. Her pearl clip shimmered softly in her undone waves. The ocean below roared like a distant memory.